Welcome to H-Frame, the only comprehensive, entirely unofficial guide to vintage Black & Decker Workmates. The website is hframe with a hyphen .weebly.com, where you will find my in-depth documentation, over 60 web pages, over 100 PDF documents, over 500 photographs, and still growing. The subject of this video is the Workmate 300, also known as the model 79-033. I will refer to it primarily as the 300 in this video. It was introduced in 1982, replacing the classic original US Workmate 79-001. The 300 remained in the Workmate lineup until about 1995. I will be showing you two different Workmate 300s today, one from 1982 and the other from about 1987. But to start with, I have on the left as a reference my 79-001 Type 9, which was made on April 6, 1982, very near the end of production of the 79-001. I have another video covering that Type 9 in detail. You may want to watch that because much of it is applicable to the Workmate 300. On the right, I have a borrowed 300 Type 1 made just over a month later on May 10th, 1982. Both were made in Black & Decker's factory in Brockville, Ontario. When I started thinking about doing a video about the Workmate 300, I expected to go into detail about what they changed when the new 300 replaced the 79-001. After all, the 79-001 had nearly an 8-year run. The introduction of a new model number, the 300, would certainly imply some significant changes. However, at that point, I had never owned or inspected a Workmate 300 closely. Meanwhile, over the course of a couple of years, a friend of mine acquired two 300s, picked up cheaply at estate or garage sales. Eventually, I decided I was ready to make my video, and he lent me the two Workmate 300s. To my surprise, the Workmate 300 is nearly identical to the 79-001 Type 9. After careful examination, I could find only 5 changes, most of them fairly trivial. Most obvious is the labeling, where the 300 has a different label on the front crossbar of the H-frame, now has its model number in large lettering on the wooden jaws, and has inch markings along the edge of the jaw for rough measurements. There's also a new label on the top of the 300 with a diagram and some instructions that I'll come back to in a moment. Looking more closely at the jaws shows that they have changed from 25mm veneered MDF, that's about an inch thick, on the 79-001 Type 9 on the left, to 22mm 7-ply plywood, about 7/8 inch, on the 300 on the right. Moving down to the footrest, finds that the 300 now has a series of holes along the rear edge to hold tools to help you keep them organized while you're working instead of setting them on the bench top or on the floor. Another change to the footrest puzzles me. Both of these two have rectangular holes in the front left and right corners of the footrest, but the ones on the 300, you can see on the right here, are significantly longer front to back. The holes are there to provide clearance for the spring clips on the upper frame that engage with the lower frame to hold the Workmate in the folded position. However, the clips and their position didn't change between the 79001 and the 300, so there is no apparent purpose on the 300 for the larger slots. One possible explanation is that this same footrest plate was used on the Workmate 400, which I have never examined. So perhaps the clips on the 400 are positioned differently, requiring the longer slot, and they wanted to use the same part on more than one model. I'll also note an anomaly here. The footrest plate from the 300 with the longer corners, holes, and the tool holders is sometimes found on a 79001 Type 9. I have photos of 4 79001 Type 9s with this newer footplate. The combination of the change in the jaws and the holes in the footrest is probably mostly responsible for reducing the weight of the 300 by about 1 pound as compared to the 79001 Type 9. Finally, there is one change to the operation of the 300, or at least there's supposed to be. Remember the diagram I showed you on the new label on the jaws of the 300? It alerts you to a small plastic piece referred to as a lock found next to the right-hand top release button. It's this black piece with multiple extensions on it. It appears to be a safety lock to prevent the Workmate from collapsing if the regular latch should fail. According to the instructions on the jaw, which also appear in the manual for this model, to fold the Workmate, you have to first pull forward on the springy part of this plastic lock piece, and then push the latch button. However, on this particular Workmate, the lock simply doesn't do anything. I can easily fold and unfold the Workmate without ever touching the lock. I've examined it very carefully and I can't see any sign that it is broken, so I can't explain this. If you have a Workmate 300 Type 1, I'd like to hear from you about whether this lock piece is present on yours and whether it actually functions as a lock. So that's it for the changes on the 300 as compared to the final Type 9 version of the 79001 that in this particular case preceded it by only 1 month. All of these could be called trivial in comparison with some of the changes made between individual types during the production run of the 79001. So why wasn't this iteration designated the 79001 Type 10 rather than giving it a whole new model number? The answer is found by looking at the entire lineup of floor standing Workmates, which got a major revamp in 1982. The older models had a hodgepodge of 5-digit hyphenated model numbers that were probably confusing to both buyers and sellers. Black & Decker decided what was needed was a new, consistent naming convention. 2 brand new models were introduced. The 200 was practically a clone of the 300, but about 85 to 90% of the size in footprint of the 300. The 400 was a similar proportion, larger than the 300, and with some new features incorporated. The other 2 models in the lineup were continuations of earlier ones, renamed to create a lineup of the 100, 200, 300, and 400. The 100 was the smallest single height model, extremely similar to the previous 79-003, and that leaves the 300, which, as I've already described, was simply a continuation of the 79-001. It was Black & Decker's original and best-selling model, and in spite of the name change, they didn't see a name for any redesign, any significant redesign at that point. But as time went on, it was inevitable that they would tinker with the Workmate 300. What I have here on the right now is a second Workmate 300 79-033, same model number, but this one a Type 9 from about 1987, now made in Brazil instead of Brockville, Ontario. I'll start by saying that I think this type number is misleading. I don't think they made a full set of types 2 through 8 of the 300 during the 5 years that elapsed between the two that you see here. I'm just not sure what happened with the type numbering of the Workmates after the 79-001, which that one progressed sequentially from the Type 1 in 1974 to the Type 9 in 1981 without skipping any numbers. For the Workmate 300, I have found records of only a Type 1, Type 9, Type 10, and Type 13. So let's look at what changed in 5 years on the Workmate 300 between the Type 1 and Type 9. For the rest of this video, when I refer to the Type 1 or Type 9, remember that I'm talking about two versions of the Model 300, not the 79-001 Type 9 that I compared this with at the beginning of this video. Unless I explicitly say that I'm referring to the 79-001. Couple of things you notice right off the bat on the Type 9. They changed the color of the frame on this one. They, instead of using the, what I think of as the classic Workmate gray color, they have painted the Type 9 all black. In addition, they changed the knobs on the handles for the vise to a bright orange. Not quite as obvious is that they changed the size of the handles and the knobs. They've reduced it slightly. And I'm not quite sure why they did that. These seem somewhat inferior to me. They're just a little too small for my hands, but maybe they saved enough money by reducing the amount of material that it was worth it for them. But I think it was a step backwards. Starting at the top, the jaws have changed from 7-ply plywood on the Type 1 on the left to what I'm going to call particle board, due to a coarser looking texture than the material used on some of the 79-001s, which I refer to as MDF. The number of dog holes and their pattern has changed, now with only 7 holes instead of the 9 that were provided previously. Along the front edge of the jaw, of the front jaw, the Type 1 has 5 dog holes. You can see counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the Type 9, This was reduced to only 3, those 3 along there, by eliminating the dog holes that were at the far right and left front corners. The other edge of the front jaw, where the jaws meet each other, still has its original 4 holes. If I go across here, 1, 2, 3, 4 holes along that edge you can see on the Type 1. But what they did was they moved the 2 outer holes to the far extreme left and right corners. You can see this hole right here was the farthest out of the 4 holes on the Type 1. On the Type 9, it's been moved all the way out to the corner. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And of course the rear jaw has the same changes, but in a mirror image. On the footrest, there's the Type 1 again. They've added a section of cross ribbing in the center. At the outer edges of the front of the footrest, it would be easy to overlook a pair of small vertical slots. You can see this right in the center of the screen here. See that slot? And on the Type 1, that corner vertical face is solid instead of having a slot. And then there is a matching hole on the right end of the front on the Type 9. On the Type 1, there are black nylon bushings at the pivot points of the H-frames. And the H-frames and the side stays are attached with screws. There's another screw for the H-frame. The Type 9 has no bushings at all, and the connections on it, it's a little hard to see here, are made with rivets rather than screws. There's one rivet, there's another one, which makes repairs and restoration more difficult on the Type 9. The side stay on the Type 9 does not have the bend in it that it's hard to show that to you here. You can see just a slight bend in the middle of the side stay there. And the side stay on the Type 9 is longer and attaches lower on the side of the frame. Here's the side stay on the Type 1. You can see it connects near the top of the lower side frame piece, whereas the side stay on the Type 9 goes all the way down, well, maybe 2/3, 3/4 probably of the way down on the side piece before it attaches. In the length, shape, and placement, the side stay on the Type 9 is actually a close match to the side stay on the earlier types of the 79001. This comes about because of the revised latch mechanism, I'm pretty sure. It necessitated attaching that at a different point. Black & Decker did away with the pinball buttons introduced on the 79001 Type 9, replacing them with levers that are somewhat similar to what was used on the 79001 Type 1 through Type 8, the originals, Workmates for the US. Like the pinball buttons, these levers are used both to raise the top from the lowered position and to lower it from the raised position. This is different than the way that the earlier lever arrangements worked. where you had to use a lever for lowering the top, and you had to press on a catch on the side in a different spot to raise it from the folded position. This new mechanism here on the Type 9 is identical to what was introduced on the UK model WM625E05 a few years earlier. So I guess Black & Decker for the US decided that the Brits had come up with a good new way to operate the mechanism. The lever right here is where you put your finger to pull on it. The opposite end of that same piece is the working end. You can see right now that that is sort of trapped in the slot and keeps the top from, or keeps the side stay from moving in the slot, and that keeps the top upright. When you pull on the lever, the opposite end rotates and gets to a different position in the slot. That allows the side stay to start moving, and the top can go down. When the Workmate is folded, as you see it here, that opposite end of the lever now acts as a hook, which catches, it actually inserts into the slot on the front corner of the footrest that I showed you earlier. You can see the hook goes in and comes out. When you operate the lever and pull the hook out of the slot, then the Workmate can be raised from the folded position. When you lower it down, it snaps into that. So the spring is what keeps it in the slot, similar to when the Workmate was in the upright position. The spring holds it in the right part of the slot to be locked. With the Workmates turned upside down, I'll show you a few more changes. Most significant is the new latch for the leg. The Type 1 has the friction hinge that acts as a latch for the leg. The new latch, the Type 9 does away with the friction hinge, and it instead has a plastic latch you can see here with a curved top. A metal edge of the leg slides across the curved surface of the plastic latch, then goes over a projection at either end, catching on it to hold the leg either in the folded or open position. It's pretty common for these plastic pieces to break from use and age, but replacements are readily available and are reasonably easy to install. Another difference is in the legs themselves. The leg on the Type 9 on the right here may not be easy to see in photos or in the video, but on the Type 9 the leg is substantially less sturdy appearing, has less mass, less mass to it, and just seems cheaper. And I'm quite sure it is cheaper. I can't say for sure that it doesn't function as well, but it seems like a step backwards. Another change, the rubber boot feet on the ends of the legs were changed in style. They now have the one in front, of course, with the black leg is from the Type 9. The one in back on the gray leg is from the Type 1. So the one on the Type 9 has an angled bottom so that the feet can sit more flat on the floor. The ones on the Type 9 usually wind up sitting sort of on one of their edges because of the way they're shaped. The plastic corner feet on the Type 1 here that had carried forward from the 79001 Type 9, you can see what this black plastic angled corner foot looks like. Those are gone. They're replaced by short metal studs that are a permanent part of the frame. That's what this right here is. Those are covered with their own small rubber boots with a triangular shape. These tend to come off pretty easily and get lost, and that which is actually the case on one corner of this Type 9. So that's it for my examination of the Workmate 300. You can find much more about this and all of the early Workmates at my website, including owner's manuals, part diagrams, catalog and newspaper appearances, as well as discoveries I've made that are not documented anywhere else. Thanks for watching.